Okay, I will start with the review of chapter number 7, first 10 verses that we took up last time. We looked up verses 1 to 10 of chapter 7, and if you remember, I chose to call them Solomon's Beatitudes. There were 8 that we listed that day. A good name is better than good fragrance. Day of death better than day of birth. House of mourning better than house of feasting. Sorrow better than laughter. A rebuke of wise better than the songs of fools. End better than beginning. Patient in spirits better than proud in spirit. And today is better than the former days. Now, if we look closely at this list, we can categorize it to 3 major blocks. Uh, the Beatitudes 1 and 2, that is, a good name better than good fragrance, and day of death better than day of birth. These 2 Beatitudes, he starts by taking a simple example and uses it to push us to up our aspirations, to think bigger, not just to be content in the joy of those simple things. For example, a good ointment or a birthday. These are good things. But we can just be happy about it, enjoy that fragrance, or just enjoy that day. And that's it, we don't look beyond. But in the first and the second Beatitude, he's telling us there's something better than just enjoying that fragrance or just enjoying your birthday. There is something greater that you can aspire for. So, 2 of those Beatitudes are about raising our aspirations. 4 of those Beatitudes, that is number 3, 4, 5, and 8. 3 is house of mourning better than house of feasting. 4 is sorrow better than laughter. 5 is rebuke of wise better than the songs of fools. And 8 is today is better than the former days. Now, these 4 Beatitudes, he is giving us alternatives to the things that we usually choose to do. So there are things that we like to do because they are easier. But the critic here gives us 4 better alternatives, which we will usually sideline. And the main reason why we will sideline them is because they're emotionally very tiring. They demand a lot of emotional load. So when you talk about a house of mourning or sorrow or rebuke of the wise or the toughness of the present days, we want to remember the former days. We want to listen to the song of fools. We want to laugh. We want to go to the house of feasting. So he's saying that don't sideline these better alternatives I'm going to give you. So one is upping the aspirations. Second is including that you sideline. And the third category of things is Beatitude number 6 and 7. The end is better than the beginning, and a patient in spirit better than the proud in spirit. Now, in this, he is reminding us that there are some things that we know are right and are good, but we do not persist in doing that right thing or that good thing because we know that it takes a lot of effort. It doesn't come easily. It is not something we can achieve or attain easily. So we'll just let that go by because it's too much of an effort. So he's saying that no, you should persist. You should do it. You should aim for it. You should get there. So 3 categories. One is aspirations, asking us to aspire for more. One is the second one is not sidelining that which is better, and the third one is to keep persisting to attain, because that is definitely going to take a lot of effort, but it's definitely going to be worth it. So this is the review of the first 10 verses. After this, we will move ahead. So let's go into the chapter, verses 11 to 29. We'll see that Solomon, the critic, is mainly going to talk about wisdom in this chapter. After telling us about what are the better things in life that we should aim for and giving us a few examples, he shifts gear into wisdom and he stays in this topic, talking about different aspects of wisdom from different angles, and he brings out some very interesting perspectives which we'll look at now. When we read verses 11, 12, 13, 14, 19, 20, 21, 22, we will see 5 different aspects of wisdom being brought out, and he's kind of arguing from these verses why wisdom is needed. So I will majorly draw 5 points while I'm talking, right from verse number 11 to verse number 22. In the middle, we may just shift for other things, but majorly he's talking about 5 major aspects of wisdom. Number 1 is wisdom is needed for assortment. Number 2, wisdom is needed for acceptance. Number 3, wisdom is needed to be atop. Number 4, wisdom needed for allowance. And number 5, wisdom needed for avoidance. Now don't worry about these headings. You will understand when I'll explain what's happening in these verses. Let's go to verses 11 and 12. And we read there that wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. For wisdom is a defense as money is a defense. But the excellence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. Now, before we go into what verses 11 and 12 are saying, we should note that he is shifting to the topic of wisdom immediately after talking about Beatitudes and finding the better things in life, right? So what he's actually saying is, after he gives us things to aspire for and persist after and not sideline but accept, he's saying that even to make those decisions about what is better in life, what we will need is wisdom. So instead of going into the verses 11 and 12, I'm just picking up why he picked on wisdom immediately after talking about these 8 things. Things that happen in life are not so plain clear that we can make decisions very clearly. So we need to discern continually, on a continuous basis, in real time, whatever that is happening to us. And how can we do that? We can only do that when we have wisdom. So what will wisdom do? Wisdom will help us look into everyday events and routines and help us to look beyond. Like for a birthday, we are happy with the birthday, but we look beyond the birthday. Wisdom will help us do that. So I'm just taking that example. But wisdom is required to not just be content in the things we do, but to look beyond it. Is there something more? Is there something better? Is there something greater that I can aspire for? So aspirations. Wisdom will help us towards those aspirations. Number 2, to remember to choose the emotionally tiring things over what we usually prefer, the easier way. So wisdom will be needed at that time when we want to sideline certain things just because I'm too tired. So you reach home after a long day of work and then suddenly somebody's sick or somebody has an urgent need, or you need to travel another 10 kilometers and cater to a family. Oh no, not today, I'm so tired. But wisdom, or somebody's just on the phone wanting to pour out their pain on or their grief all over you, and you are not wanting to do it just because you know that you are already very tired and you cannot take another load of emotionally taxing information on yourself. But wisdom will help you to choose those emotionally tiring things that we sideline, because it will help us, is what Solomon says. And then wisdom will also help us to keep persisting when things look beyond our capacities. I cannot do this. This is beyond me. I cannot bear it one more day. I cannot take this for one more hour. I can, day before yesterday night when I was sleeping, I felt so strange and odd when I was going to sleep. as if my neck will break or my head will explode, something like that. And I just felt for a moment that I can't take this for one more second, and immediately I said, Lord, please help me. So there are times when things will look beyond our capacities, and there are things that we will think that we will not be able to do, and that's when wisdom will be needed. So my wisdom was that I immediately called upon God. Of course, many of us will do the same thing, but sometimes we don't. So it might look unreasonable to keep doing certain things, but wisdom will help us to push beyond our capacities. So that's why the first thing he talks about is that wisdom is need for assortment of so many events that happen in our lives. Wisdom is very crucial, and that's why in verse number 11 he says that it is better than inheritance. It is more valuable than money. Okay, so the first need, wisdom is needed for assortment. So many things in our life, and we need to sort it out properly. So before going into the second point, which is wisdom is needed for acceptance, I would like to dwell deeper into verses 11 and 12, where he says that it is good to have wisdom with an inheritance. Wisdom is better. As good as money or better than money. Both these meanings seem to come out from that verse. What does money offer us? Right? That's what he's saying, that for wisdom is a defense as money is a defense. How does money defend us? I can immediately say two things. It offers us protection against worry, and it offers us protection against threats. How does money defend us? By protecting us against worry and protecting us against threats. How does it protect us against worry? For example, in the time of this lockdown, when no work is happening around us, of course, some of you are still working at home, and probably some of you are working more from home than from the office. All those things are true. But people like me who are into running an industry, we have no option but to sit at home. There's nothing much to do but to find things to keep you more busy. But when no work is happening around us, what keeps us from getting too stressed or being worried is the money in the bank. It is a solace for us. That's what money offers us. It defends us. It protects us from worry. We know that even if a few more weeks go by like this, we can survive. But imagine if something else was the truth. Imagine if money had come low before the lockdown, and you had to take salary cuts, or your money got delayed for some reason, and you are going to go through this lockdown, and then suddenly you're low on cash, and then there is an announcement that the lockdown is being extended. It tends to make you restless, pensive, worried. How will I go about? But the money in the bank makes sure that we are protected against such kind of stress. So having money is a defense against such tough times. But money also protects us against threats. Physically, money helps us procure more safe and secure systems for our house, for our workplace, for our vehicles. Money helps us build higher compound walls, thicker walls for our walls, employ external agencies in case there are threats. Medically, money helps us secure better medical facilities, consult better doctors, eat healthy food. So money is a good defense even for our health. Financially, it helps us procure services to protect our investments, consult experts, though all these have limitations. But it definitely defends us by protecting us against threats. Now, what the critic says is that just like money defends us from worry and threats, wisdom also defends us. In fact, it is a better defense. Why? Because it will protect us by helping us anticipate things before they even happen, and therefore it will lead us to life. So the first thing that wisdom makes wisdom better than money is that it anticipates the things that are going to happen. Second thing is, it will protect us much longer than money can. See, money can get us things that will fade away or expire after a certain time, either because the span of the thing you buy is short-lived, or because there is a contract and that contract is over. So money has a limitation, but wisdom doesn't come to us with an expiry date. In fact, it only continues to become more and more sharper with time. So wisdom is a better difference. Then money cannot buy us wisdom, but wisdom can get us money. Money cannot buy us wisdom, but wisdom can get us money. And the fourth reason why I think wisdom is better than money is because money can only defend what we have got. Wisdom can also defend what we have not got, we will get. So it extends into the future and can take care of things in the future. So in that sense, it is better than money. Now let me go into the second point, which is in verses 13 and 14. Consider the work of God, for who can make straight what he has made crooked? In the day of prosperity be joyful, but in the day of adversity consider. Surely God has appointed the one as well as the other, so that man can find out nothing that will come after him. So wisdom is needed for acceptance. That's the second thing about wisdom. So wisdom, the first thing we said was wisdom is needed for assortment. Second thing is wisdom is needed for acceptance. Wisdom will help you consider the role of God in your life. And wisdom will help you to understand that God has made crooked some things in our lives and that cannot be made straight. On the other hand, wisdom will also help you understand that what God has made straight, no power in hell or on earth can make it crooked. So our mind naturally tends to think the converse, which I said first, that what God has made crooked, nothing can make it straight, but we should also not forget there are several things in our life that God has made straight and nothing can make it crooked. So wisdom helps us to accept things that happen in our lives instead of going into a state of denial, which only impacts us adversely. To get into a place of acceptance that yes, God has ordained certain things to happen in my life. So wisdom will help you to be cheerful in the good times and be contemplative in the bad times with gratefulness, to acknowledge that God makes both and allows them in our lives in a way that man will find no reason to blame him. I'll tell you, on hindsight, when we look back at the bad times in our life, they have been the greatest teachers. They have been the times when our characters and our lives have really been molded. When I look back at the 46 years that I have lived on this planet, I can tell you that it is through those tough times that I got molded and prepared. And those tough times broke me. Those tough times broke me emotionally, financially, mentally, even spiritually, because I allowed a lot of things to happen in my life. But even through those, I learned a lot of lessons to reach here where I am today. So that accept. So I have come to a place where I accept anything that happens in my life, but not now at 46. I have come to that place maybe about 15 years back when I realized that God is sovereign over my life and He has a purpose with my life. And if He has called me, He will take me to where He has purposed me. On an everyday basis, I do whatever I want to, but I should know that the outer boundaries and the major landmarks in my life are decided by God. So I need to come into that place of acceptance when especially it comes to the bad things, when an order fails, or when my plans get messed up, or there was something big coming up and then I could not match up to it. I need to accept it as a part of the overall plan of God. So wisdom helps me to accept. It reminds me of the patterns in the past and helps me to apply it even right now. So now we will shift to verse number 19. We will come to the verses in between later. Now, verse number 19, he goes to say that wisdom is needed to be on the top, atop. Wisdom needed to be atop. So wisdom needed for assortment, wisdom needed for acceptance, and wisdom needed to be atop. Now, again, uh, this is a way of saying that wisdom is very valuable. What will we not do to be in touch with the 10 most powerful people in our city? Right? Verse 19 says that wisdom strengthens the wise more than 10 rulers of the city. Wisdom can give us more than what? Our relationship with 10 very powerful people in the city can give us. That is the parallel to the power of wisdom. You take 10 powerful people in your city on one side and wisdom on the other side. So instead of trying to befriend the mighty men in our city, we should become a little more serious and committed about becoming wise. Wisdom is a lot more weighty than we think. Wisdom can give us much more head road than we imagine it to give to us. So wisdom is needed to be at. Verse number 20 says, "For there is not a just man on earth who does good and does not sin." Verse number 20 tells us that wisdom is needed to give ourselves some allowance. Now, why this point is very crucial is because sometimes we can get into this place that since we are wise, this is for all those who think that they are now wise or they have attained wisdom from God or for whatever means. But once we are wise, we can reach this place where we think that, oh, I am a wise man. I have made a wise decision. I have made a wise choice. How can it be wrong? So verse 20 is that there is no just man on earth who does good and does not sin. It's just to let us know that just because we have wisdom on our side doesn't mean that we will not goof up. Just because we have wisdom on our side does not mean that we will only do good, that we will not sin. Even the wisest of people will goof up sometime or the other. So in case you have wisdom, you should not end up thinking that you will not make a mistake now. Even wise people will goof up despite their wisdom. So wisdom is needed for allowance that you give to yourself. So wisdom is needed for assortment. Wisdom is needed for acceptance. Wisdom is needed to be atop. Wisdom needed for allowance. And the last point is wisdom is needed for avoidance. That is verses 21-22. Also do not take to heart everything people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. For many times also your own heart has known that even you have cursed others. Wisdom will tell you to avoid listening to everything that everyone says. People will keep talking behind you. They will talk behind your back about you or about things that you have strong opinions about. And the critic says, you need not hear everything that everyone says, even if it is about you, or it has got to do with something that you are interested in, or it has got to do about your children or your wife or your company. We have this nature, desire to know what others are talking about us when we are not listening. We would definitely want to know more. So even if we are not in that place, not in that conversation, and later on somebody tells us that yes, we talked about you when we got together, oh my God, what happens inside of us? It's like 10 antennas come up and we want to know what was discussed about us. What is it that you guys said? And if you get a hint that they were probably not talking good about you, then you want to corner someone in that group, take them to a corner and ask them, what did you guys talk about me? So this desire in us to know what people talk about us. What the critic says is, don't go around asking, or do not try to overhear when they are not aware. And if you do, you might come across, or you might overhear them speak something which you don't like. They may be backbiting, they may be speaking ill about you. You may hear it. It's very possible in social relationships that a little bit of bickering, backbiting, gossiping keeps happening. And that's why it's important that you don't go back to some of those places where you're not there. That's a lead from the critic. Now, the interesting example of overhearing is drawn here from someone who has a legitimate reason to complain against you. What does it say? You might hear your servant cursing you. So this is a guy who has a legitimate reason to complain against you, and you will hear it, and you will find it difficult to accept what he says. And then all that grudge and all that prejudice will come out the next time when you see him in your house and look at his face. You want to confront him, you want to even throw him out of the house. You can get really hurt. But what the critic says is that people often say needless things. Now, it is not because they mean it as such. You have to understand human nature. They do not say these things to state that you are the worst person on the earth or the worst person they have seen. No, that is not their intent. If that were so, then they would never have a relationship with you. They tend to do it. Of course, we may call it, oh, they are hypocrites, they talk behind your back. But you should also understand, that's why verse 22 says that in your own heart, you have also done the same thing about others. So why are you pointing fingers? So when others are not there, you have done the same thing. So how can you expect that when you are not there, they will not be doing the same about you? They will be doing it. Now, often this is done because people have a way of letting off some of the pressures and some of these bad vibes inside of them. They want to get it out of them, and unknowingly also they might do it, and they want to move on. So that's what they might be doing, and that's when you catch them precisely at that point and you're misled. Don't get into it. Wisdom is needed for avoidance. Wisdom tells you, don't go back. Let them talk, because it's not going to change you. What they talk behind your back about you is not going to change you, not going to impact you. And if what they say behind you impacts your friendship or something that you do, then you really need to think about your friends and about what you do. Wisdom will remind you that we do the same thing, not because we hate people, but because if certain differences we have with them at a certain point of time, we may just voice it out, and it may suddenly appear as a curse. So wisdom is needed for assortment, wisdom is needed for acceptance, wisdom is needed to be atop, wisdom is needed for allowance, and wisdom is needed for avoidance. Okay, so let me go ahead. Now I come back to verses 15 to 18. Now I'm going to highlight three major points which come from 15 to 18, and then verses 23 to 25, and then verses 26 to 28. Now these three set of verses are hindrances for wisdom. He was saying why wisdom was better, why wisdom is needed. But in the middle of this, he is also laying out for us the hindrances for wisdom. The first set of hindrance for wisdom is the shift of balance. That is what I want to call it. Verses 15 to 18. The shift of balance. So the critic was so far putting to us the case of engaging in seemingly opposite kind of activities, not just laughter but sorrow, not just songs but rebuke too, not just partying but mourning too. So he was talking about mixing two very opposite looking characteristics or things and strike a balance. That's what he was saying. One is better than the other. He was not saying leave the other and take up the better one. He was saying that you need both, but one is better, so you know where to put more time and effort. So he was asking us to strike a balance. Now he takes that argument forward when he cites the incidents that take place when people don't strike the balance and shift to extremes, when people avoid remaining moderate but shift to extremes. So that's what we'll see in verses 15 to 18. What he says is that I have seen everything in my days of vanity. There is a just man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. So do not be overly righteous, do not be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be overly wicked, do not be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp this and also not remove your hand from the other. For he who fears God will escape them all. Now I want you to understand at this point that he first draws from the randomness of life. Remember the three filters? The march of time, the certainty of death, and the randomness of life. So he suddenly brings in the randomness, and then he says that I have seen certain things. He talks first about a righteous and a just man. This guy always did what was right, not just in the eyes of God, but in the eyes of man. He believed in a sense of fairness that needed to exist in society amongst people. However, that man lived a short life and lost his life maybe because he stood up for the right, or it could also be because he died early for some reason, maybe natural causes, while he was still a good man. So being righteous did not guarantee him a long life. Perhaps his righteousness, at this point, if we think about two major characters who come to my mind, one is Abel. He was righteous. What happened? His brother Cain became very envious of him. And then we hear about another good man. His name was Naboth. What happened to him? King Ahab took up his vineyard. There's another overly righteous fellow. His name is Uriah. And he had a wife whose name was Bathsheba, and you know what David did with Bathsheba, and mother of Solomon was Bathsheba. So he first talks about this man, and then he says that these kind of people have been good people, but somehow randomness of life doesn't make sure that they will live a long life. Then he takes another example of wickedness, and he tells that I have also seen wicked men who have lived a long life and lived to see their old age. Such a man was expected to die early. In fact, people around him thought that, why does he die? If he dies early, we will, at least our suffering will end. But these guys, they lived long and prolonged the sufferings of many under their wickedness. So the critic is saying that such things do happen in life. So we will have to incorporate that. I will continue this. So righteous people do die early and wicked people do live long. It is not worthwhile, therefore, to be over righteous or over wise or be over wicked or over foolish. That's what he argues till verse 17. Now you may be wondering why he is saying this, over wise and over righteous. Or you may even be wondering about why he's talking about over wicked and over foolish. Is he asking us to be not over wicked but wicked? Or is he asking us to be a little foolish? Is he asking us to draw or strike a balance in that? No, that is not. It's a poetic book also. It's written in a poetic sense also. So what we need to understand is, when he talks about do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise, why should you destroy yourself? He is not talking about people who are genuinely righteous and genuinely wise. He is talking about show-offs, people who show off. People who show off their righteousness, people who show off their wisdom. They like to display. Both these cases, what happens when people are show-offs, they will usually have a tendency to look down on those who do not match up. And that's a big reason why they make enemies around them. People who are showing off their righteousness or wisdom usually will be hard on those around them. So they end up making enemies, or they end up living too strictly. Not doing this, not doing that, not looking here, not looking there, not listening to this, not listening to that, not wearing this, not wearing that. And they end up destroying their desires, destroying their lives, or they end up making enemies around them. So we're talking about show-offs. And then when he says that do not be overly wicked and nor be foolish, why should we die before your time? He is now talking about spin-offs. So show-offs and spin-offs. So who are the spin-offs? These are guys, again remember this is a poetic expression, these are guys who actually watch the world and see that, hey, see, that guy is a wicked guy, but who can harm him? Look at him. He has so much of money and he uses all that money to live long. He gets the best of doctors. He does this, he does. Oh, nobody touches him. He lives long. So they see a lot of wicked people around them living long, being untouched, living a luxurious life. You know what they end up saying? That I will become like them, or I will become greater than them. So they take a few extra steps into wickedness and do more scandalous things. So what Solomon or the critic is doing is he's not advising you to become wicked or foolish. You should not take it that way. He's not doing that. He's asking us not to take the randomness of life as an excuse to do something more gross and grave. If you end up getting inspired, and strangely that is the tendency, isn't it? So one goon inspires another to become worse, and one fool inspires another to be more foolish. That's the nature of the fallen man. So he's saying that don't take this as an excuse. This is randomness. Don't take it as a forbearance of God, or that nobody touches a wicked man. You might actually die before your time by doing that. So he ends up with verse 18 and he says, you'll do yourself a great good by maintaining balance. Don't be slack on this. And then he says, the fear of God will help you keep the balance. We have a Holy Spirit of sound mind who will not push us into extremities. Anywhere you see a stress on the extremes, your red flag should come up, red light should start shining. Any extreme teaching, especially superficial or of the extreme kind, should raise red flags. So while I talk about that, let me talk about the Christian realm today. Even in the Christian realm today, we occasionally come across groups that are extreme at one teaching or the other. They hang around the borders of what is not good. Hyper grace is one such teaching. Prosperity is one such teaching. Immortality is another teaching like that. So there are, I have not listed, but these are all teachings that edge at the border of occult. Cult. They edge at the border of cult. They have leaders and they follow those leaders very religiously. Usually these are one leader things, but prosperity is not a one leader thing. It's like a whole gang of them. But these are very extreme teachings. There is no balance there. The Spirit of God will always bring a balance. And for any of these teachings, instead of going into a concoction of teachings in the Bible, I would rather suggest to you that every time you face a dilemma in your life, the first thing you should look at is the Gospels. Go to Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Find out what these four perspectives on Jesus give you an insight on the topic you are in a dilemma about. Is Jesus talking about it, or what does it look like that Jesus is talking about? For example, hyper grace. You know, does Jesus at any point of time say that the law is bad and that now onwards your life can be any way and you will be forgiven? No. In fact, when he forgives the woman who was brought to be stoned, he forgives that lady and he says, now go, sin no more. When he forgives the guy, or rather when he heals the guy who was healed from his blindness, he says, go, sin no more. When he heals the lepers, he says, go, show the priests and finish the procedures of cleansing and get into normal society. In fact, he himself says, I have not come to abolish the law, I have come to fulfill them. But hyper grace puts down the law and kind of glorifies grace. Think about prosperity. It keeps talking about Christians being prosperous, successful. How can you be sick? How can you be poor? How can you be hungry? Name it, you claim it. You cannot be. God has purpose for you to be rulers of this earth, and therefore you can ask for anything in my name and you'll get it. You have to have faith. Your faith will do you great good. It's a faith movement, a prosperity movement. But you look at Jesus and what he says. He says, sell everything that you have, give it off to the poor and follow me. He says, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. He says, deny everything and even yourself, take up the cross and follow me. He says that if I, being the master, is being treated so badly, you as servants, think of it, how badly you will be treated. So, there is a balance. As soon as you go into the scriptures, you will see what Christ is saying about it. And then you go into the Acts of the Apostles, where you will see the first century church. Then you go into the teachings, and then you go into the history of the church. That's where we come into the church fathers, the early church fathers, and then the council, the early councils of the churches, and then you get into history. So that's how you come to a conclusion about anything. So there are so many things where teachings are at the extremes. Now, while I say that, I also want to highlight one thing. When you look closely at Christ and Paul, two examples I'm citing here, weren't they extremists? Were they moderates or they were extremists? They were extremists. They were not moderates. But you should understand that they were not imposing anything on others. They were extremes on themselves. He said, I would beat my body and bring it to subjection. He would pray all night. He would ask them to watch and pray, but he would pray rolling on the floor, blood coming out of his forehead. They went into extremes on themselves. Their extremes were balanced by the presence of the Holy Spirit. So if they moved from the center to the other extreme, the balance was brought in by the Holy Spirit. Now, that is what as Christians we should also understand. Doctrinally, we might have to be extremes, but it cannot be imposed on others, and it cannot be superficial. It's more on the inside. Therefore, through the personal lives of Paul and Christ, you will see a lot of strictness, and definitely they were not show-offs. They were not tough on others. They were not tough on people who were not able to match up. In fact, you will see that they were very gracious to even fight for those who couldn't match up. So if they found somebody who was not matching up, they would be gracious and forgive them and help them up. So just a little bit of clarity on extremes. So we saw that one of the hindrances of wisdom can be a shift of balance, going to extremes. Wisdom tells you to avoid extremes. And extreme positions can stand as a hindrance to wisdom. So you should be very careful about extreme positions that can come up in your life when you need to take a stand. Next set of hindrance is in verses 23 to 25. Now, this hindrance for wisdom is self-attainment. Now, what I mean by that is to take. Let's read that. All this I have proved by wisdom. I said I will be wise, but it was far from me. As for that which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? I applied my heart to know, to search and seek out wisdom and the reason of things, to know the wickedness of folly and even of foolishness and madness. To take advantage of the benefits of wisdom, the critic decided in his heart, I will be wise. But saying that or determining to become wise will not make you wise. Just because you make up your mind, okay, ab se main wise banne wala hu, I will be wise, will not bring wisdom. You can increase your knowledge by reading, by researching, by gathering information. But wisdom doesn't come that way. Wisdom doesn't come because we want to become wise. Wisdom is not so easily attainable, and also it is too vast and deep, says the critic. So it is difficult to attain it by oneself. In short, he is saying that wisdom is beyond the grasp of man by his own self-will and determination. But then, when you actually read verse number 25, he says that I applied my heart to know. He found out that by deciding he is not able to get wisdom, but he made it a deep desire of his to keep seeking it. So it was a dead in earnest commitment that he made towards wisdom. Some of the versions say that when I turned from it, turned from what? Turned from knowing that, wisdom cannot be attained because it's too vast and too far off and too deep for me. I realized it and then I turned away from it. But when I turned away from it also, there was a deep desire inside of me to understand, to attain wisdom, to understand life. Even when he turned about, the passion inside of him didn't die out. He was committed to seek the wisdom and the meaning and to prove that wickedness and foolishness are not right. He wanted to find out why wickedness and foolishness is so not right, So that feeling that I can attain by itself, by myself, is also an hindrance to wisdom. You should be careful. But that doesn't mean that you will not have a desire. That desire is very, very, very required. But never think that you will attain it by yourself, which means you will need God to give you wisdom. You will need God to give you wisdom. Don't ever think that you can attain it by your own efforts. Now I have come to the last part, verses 26 to 28, which is the third aspect of hindrance for wisdom. And now he says it's an ensnaring woman. So the first hindrance to wisdom was shift of balance. Second hindrance to wisdom is self-attainment. And the third hindrance for wisdom is an ensnaring woman. The critic found out that one of the biggest hindrances in the pursuits of a man can be his natural wiring, the way he is made, the way his hormones function, the way he is chemically designed. And he will be subject to attraction towards people who make romantic overtures. He will have these romantic inclinations. That is going to be a danger for him, a hindrance for him. Why? Because if a woman who intentionally uses her charm will come to trap, that woman will succeed. And he says only the fear of God can save that man from the woman. In fact, he goes on to say that he found one good man in 1,000, but not one among 1,000 women. Now that can be a very dangerous statement to say in the 21st century. But I don't think he's making a gender bias. He's not saying that women are not good or men, 1 in 1,000 men are good. No, he's not saying that. Perhaps he is also telling about his own experience. He had 1,000 wives to talk about, 700 wives and 300 concubines. But I think what we can understand from that statement is that a man who is like Solomon, wise, wealthy, successful, had done a lot of projects, he became famous and people came from far and wide to see him. And they wanted to see for real that he is this man like this, you know. So people like him, in their pursuits, will attract women with charms. And often these women with charms who approach men like this have malicious intentions. So Solomon always attracted towards him such women. That's why he is making that statement. Solomon ended up attracting people who had snares to trap him. Doesn't mean every woman is like that. But he says it's such women will come towards you and it will be a trap. And your quest for wisdom will end there. It's a hindrance to wisdom. So ask God to help you. But then it's a wonderful statement that he ends up with in verse number 29. He says that, you know, when God created man, verse number 29, let me read it out. Truly this only I have found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. So when God made, you can't blame God for all this. You know, it is all man's doing. Man has messed up everything. God made everything fine, but we only, with our desires and our twisted minds, which got corrupted by sin, we messed up everything. So that is chapter number 7 before you. I hope it was a blessing. God bless.